So why don't we begin? Welcome to the I for Energy seminar, and I'm delighted to introduce Hunter Lovins. She's here because she's the Regents lecturer for the next couple, well, actually one more week left. She's been here. She gave the Regents lecture Wednesday at the Blum Center of Developing Economies, looking more broadly at the integrated bottom line and metrics for happiness, based on a trip that she had recently come back from Bhutan, working with the Prime Minister on that. This talk today is going to be more focused about tools and solutions for energy and community development. Hunter is, I'm sure she needs no introduction, but I feel like I should since we're archiving this with her iconic cowboy hat. She's president of Natural Capitalism Solutions. She's published 14 books. She is the recognized leader in sustainable management, and I think recognized as developing it as a field and making the business case for sustainability. She has any number of awards here, and just to help me out, I've got a few of them here. She's won the European Sustainability Pioneer Award, the Right Livelihood Award, the Alternate Nobel, it's sometimes called, the 2012 Rachel Carson Award. Time magazine recognized her as the Millennium Hero for the Planet, and Newsweek called her the Green Business Icon. She is just an overall very interesting person and a rodeo rider. Please give applause to Hunter Lovins.
Thank you. Honor to be here and to be talking about energy and community energy development in one of the places where this whole discipline began. The work that Citrus is doing, the work that the Energy and Resources Group is doing remains so formative in this whole field. And yet we've more work to do. Who's responsible for community economic development? We all think it belongs to the experts. There's somebody else who's going to do it. And indeed, the traditional mental model of economic development is that it's about recruiting an outside company to come to town. If you can't recruit an outside industry, you're not doing economic development. It's about increasing the throughput of money in your community, and that the measure is the local equivalent of gross national product or jobs. It's business deals. It's opening a factory. It turns out those are, if you can get a factory to come to town, you might get some new jobs, you might get some new flow through of money in the economy, and you might also have a net loss of value of economic worth in the community. It's just exporting stuff is not enough. Genuine economic development, I will argue, comes more from doing more for yourself, replacing what it is that you're buying. And when you buy that, it necessitates that you sell something to get enough money to have it. These export-driven economies, whether on the global scale or at the local scale, suck resources from the community. And replacing the use of non-renewable resources with locally available alternatives, with innovation, with entrepreneurship, is the key to sustainable wealth creation. This is the thesis behind a tool that a group of us built a number of years back called LASER, Local Action for Sustainable Economic Renewal. A woman named Gwen Hall-Smith, who ran the Center for Global Community, Wayne Fawbush, who's worked on cluster competitiveness, is now with the Ford Foundation, Bernard Leotar, whom you may know as having a new book out about currencies and wealth creation around money, Christopher Juniper, myself. We took the work that we had done in what we called economic renewal, 4 principles, and built a workbook which you can download for free from this website, www.global-laser.org. And it is a step-by-step, how do you do locally based community economic development? Starting with the principles of slow the unnecessary flow of money from the community. This is not to say autarky, of standing isolated by yourself, but rather buy from the outside what you can't already make for yourself and which you really want to have. I'm sure all of us are fond of French wine, and at least the ladies in the room of fine perfumes. We're not going to make those ourselves. But those are the luxury items. Energy, water, housing, health care, sanitation, the services that we need as the basis of an economy, we ought to be providing for ourselves. Second, you have businesses in your town now. Support them before you offer incentives to the rest of the world to come and locate in your town. Third, create an entrepreneurial climate. In every community, there are young people with an itch to start something new. The work that Alice is doing with her design students around the maker movement, rapid prototyping, this is the key to building a durable economy in your community at home. And then finally, ensure that whatever incentives you give to bring other people there, you get a net gain from. Sustainable communities are restorative of all forms of capital, human and natural, as well as financial and manufactured. Our global economy, and indeed local economies, count, value money and stuff. We forget that human capital, intact community, natural capital, intact ecosystems are the basis for all economic wealth. Start with efficiency. This has been the genius of all of Berkeley's work around energy, that efficiency is at the heart of it. It won't get you all the way, but it's an awfully good foundation. Using approaches like biomimicry, and I guess we'll have a workshop this afternoon in how do you use the biomimetic principles, how nature does business different than how we do. And then operate in a way that is inclusive. Francis Moore Lepay's economic democracy. Capital. Capital is an asset from which you can create more assets. Assets are the systems, the programs that meet human needs. And it all comes back to what are the human needs that we're trying to meet. Do we exist to serve the economy, or does the economy exist to serve us? I think we've flipped it of late, where we are all servants to the economy. Go out and spend, go out and buy. Maybe we should ask, how do we build an economy that serves our needs? When you look at the forms of capital that exist within a community and begin to count in your community, what is our capital? What is our human capital? What are the skills that exist here in our community? Our social capital, our historic, our cultural capital. Money and stuff is, of course, important, but so are things like, do we have a rule of law? In places that I've worked like Afghanistan, there is no rule of law. It's very difficult to do economic development without that. The built capital, and I'll talk a bit more about what you can do with that to drive economic prosperity. And most importantly, the natural capital, without which there is no life and thus no economy. Genuine sustainability enhances all forms of capital, but doing this is going to require a new set of metrics. And again, these principles limit the unnecessary outflow of money, support the existing businesses, entrepreneurs, and ensure that you have a net gain. If you can drive those 4 principles into your mind, pretty much any kind of economic development that you do will enhance the community. Because we're making a lot of mistakes now. Communities assume we have to grow. If we're not growing, we're dying. That is, by the way, the ideology of a cancer cell. Conventional strategies have an enormous amount of momentum. Well, that's what we've always done. New ideas are risky. The ones calling the shots, the political powerhouses, are typically benefiting from the way things are done now. Duh. This should not be a surprise to us, but ignoring that can get us in trouble. And often nobody has set forth a vision of how could we do things differently. Growth. What does that word mean? We're coming now to talk about growth versus development. Growth can be expansion or it can be enhancement, development within a community. Expansion is bigger. More people, more malls. Development is doing a better job of meeting those human needs. And so you see now across the country, cities sprawling. Because this is growth, this is good, this is economic development. Contrast that with many countries in Europe where they have drawn urban growth boundaries and they will not extend services outside that boundary, and you have a more livable scale. Throughput. Enhancing throughput is winning, yes? Well, maybe. Throughput is measured now in conventional economic development, sales taxes, tourist days. If you increase those in just logarithmically, what are you going to have left of the community that you were doing this, in whose name you were doing all of this? And particularly given the constraints facing us, commodity prices rising. If you're buying commodities from outside, this can be a recipe for economic disaster. Walmart has calculated that every penny increase in the cost of gasoline is $1 billion lost in consumer purchasing power. And Walmart, as you may remember, has a business model that places it at the edge of town, so people have to drive. Walmart knows exquisitely the cost of increasing gasoline. Now, this is an old number. This is before the 2008 collapse. But at the time, we were spending $2 billion a day from the U.S. economy buying oil from parts of the world that don't like us. We're bleeding to death, nationally and locally. A typical community spends more than 20% of gross income buying energy from outside of the community. 80% of those dollars are gone. This is reverse economic development. Obviously, slowing that outflow is key to building a strong local economy. Back in 1979, a man named Wes Birdsall picked up a thermograph. For those of you who work in building science, this will be a piquant picture. He went around and he filmed houses in Osage, Iowa, hardly the hotbed of industrial innovation in the United States. He was the manager of the utility. But he did an interesting thing. He stepped across the meter to the customer's side to say, I'm going to help you use less of my product. Why would he do that? Because he realized you don't want electricity. You want the services that electricity delivers to you, cold beer, hot showers. He realized if he can deliver you those services cheaper through efficiency than through new supply, that was a better business. And he wound up saving $1 million a year in this small rural town, cut energy bills to half that of the state average, unemployment to half that of the national average. With the lower bills, more factories came to town. His efficiency program drove conventional economic development, not the other way around. Wes is, to me, one of the early heroes of this movement of figuring out that efficiency is the foundation of community economic development. Same thing in companies. My team walked into a big company, 6,300 computers and monitors. They left on 24/7 because of some urban myths. Shortens the life of the computer to turn it off and on. No. Oh, IT needs it left on 24/7. No, one night a week will do fine. In this company, just publishing a policy, turn the darn things off if you're not sitting in front of them, would save them $700,000 a year. This is free money. The economists will tell us this isn't possible. If this existed in a manifestly perfect market, it would have been captured. This is a real story. And our economy wastes $2.8 billion every year buying and burning energy to run computers with nobody home. It's about a quarter of the cost of running a typical office building. Ohio State figured this out, put up a policy, turn your computers off at night or plug them into power controllers, saved themselves $250,000 a year. They're putting that toward the academic programs. And these examples multiply throughout our economy. Anchorage did a lighting retrofit a couple of years back before it was the popular thing to do, went straight to LEDs. By the way, LEDs like being cold. It's cold in Anchorage. Cut the city's electricity bill, $360,000, and now you can see the aurora borealis. This stuff is particularly a rich target environment in buildings. Buildings are responsible for a lot of our energy use, a lot of pollution, a lot of global warming. If you do the carbon footprint of cities, New York City, 70% from buildings. Same thing in Chicago. And of course, we know a lot about what to do with buildings. You can build them right in the first place, as the Banner Bank building did in Boise, Idaho. Again, hardly the hotbed of modern innovation. Their platinum LEED building rents faster. This means that the builder got a 32% return on investment right in the midst of the economic downturn. I mentioned New York's figures. Chicago is roughly the same. 70% of their footprint is buildings. So Rahm Emanuel has a program to cut greenhouse gas emissions 25% below 1990 levels by 2020, 80% below by 2050, which is roughly in line with what the scientists say we need to do, and save themselves a boatload of money. Money. Per megawatt saved in a community, you generate over $2 million in increased economic activity, over $500,000 in wages, and Dan Kammen's work, renewables, let alone efficiency, generate something like 10 times the number of jobs that you get from investing in any kind of central station. This surprised the Republican governor of Florida. He had perhaps been reading the Sports Illustrated swimsuit model that showed a Marlins baseball player up to his waist in water from expected flooding from global warming, and said, all right, how much is it going to cost the state to do something about global warming? Surprise, it's going to add money to the state budget. The 50-so recommendations, $28 billion in net economic savings. Same thing here. A group called Next 10 has run the numbers on fully implementing AB 32. Add $76 billion to the state economy, create over 400,000 new jobs. Capturing these savings, though, is not wholly straightforward. Take a house. How many of you have had your house retrofitted? Yeah. I sort of have. This is my story. I bought an old house, and it was obviously leaky. It was cold in the winter. So I call in a house doctor with a blower door who comes along and leaves me an audit report. Now, I know a little bit about energy, and I looked at this thing, and I couldn't figure out what it meant. And I'm sitting here scratching my head saying, if I can't figure it out, ordinary homeowner is just, all right, I'm glazed over. So in Boulder, we're instituting a program called 2 Techs in a Truck. When the guy comes with a blower door and the thermograph, modern thermograph, this, by the way, is the ridge line of my house. You can see how much it was leaking. There's a girl right behind with a caulk gun. If somebody's going to come and audit your house with a blower door and go to all the trouble of figuring out where your leaks are, for Pete's sakes, plug them up. Then. An audit will cost you, what, depending on PG&E's subsidies, $25, $100, $300. And how much energy have you saved after your audit? None. This is stupid. If, as you're doing the audit, you're plugging the leaks. By the way, as many of you who deal with building science know, there are lots of leaks. There are big leaks and there are little leaks. And unless you've plugged the big leaks, you're not going to find the little leaks. They're masked by the big leaks. So plug the little leaks, then do the big leaks. And when your audit is over, they don't have to leave you a report because you have a much more comfortable house. Then you can put renewables on, which is what I did, a 5-kilowatt system designed to run an electric car, which as soon as their prices come down a little bit, I am going to procure and get rid of my old car. This is not unlike what Sacramento did. Combining energy efficiency with renewables. Those of you who've lived here for a while will remember the story. Rancho Seco didn't work very well. The people voted it out of existence. SMUD lost about 1,000 megawatts all at once. So rather than build a new 1,000-megawatt plant, it did this diversity of efficiency and different kinds of renewables and combined heat and power to get experience with it. Ed Smeloff ran the numbers. Over about a 10-15-year period, the regional economy increased by about 130 million. Had the plant kept running, rates were projected to go up 80%. They held rates level over a decade. This kept in place 2,000 jobs at companies that said if the rates go up, we're leaving, and enabled SMUD to pay off its debt. Pretty decent economic development plan. Now SMUD's working with the Carbon War Room, Richard Branson's outfit, which has pulled together all of the big actors in a real estate transaction, from the financier to the insurance company to the energy service company, to go in and do massive commercial building retrofits. And again, enormous economic development benefit from it. They reckon the programs in Miami-Dade and SMUD will create better part of 40,000 new jobs, $1 billion in tax benefits, $10 billion in overall economic benefit. If you can't get Branson's crew to come to town, what do? You guys invented it, Berkeley first. Berkeley was the first city to put in place what's now come to be called PACE financing. This notion that the government puts together a pool of money. You can go and access the money, use it for efficiency or renewables, pay it back out of a slight increase to your property tax. If I go get a loan, my property tax goes up, but if you don't, your property tax stays the same. It sold out in 9 minutes. Nils Moe down at the city has been operating it. Brilliant program. replicated in Sonoma. And in Sonoma, in the county, you have some interesting numbers. In the first 9 months of the program, in '09, in the teeth of the recession, construction trades went up 8.4%. In neighboring Napa that did not have the program, jobs went down 3%, as they did for the Bay Area as a whole. Do we want more jobs in our communities? We know how to do it. Put in place PACE financing. Oh, and then those paragons of financial rectitude, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, both of them bankrupt, came along and said, we will redline any jurisdiction that has PACE financing. And still to this date, nobody has figured out how to squash Fannie and Freddie. We've got PACE financing back for commercial buildings. Sonoma said, we don't care, we're going ahead. But PACE basically died across the country. Brilliant program that could have infused billions of dollars into communities. Well, okay, that won't work. What next? Why is it that California gets 70% more sunlight than cold, cloudy Germany, but Germany has been installing 28 times the amount of solar as California? We're now hearing from the neocons that Germany has more sunlight. No, it doesn't. And Germany's now reckoning to be 100% renewably powered by 2050. They'll be probably half renewably powered by 2020 or sooner. Deutsche Bank did a study, showed that in the first 4 years of the program, they created about 500,000 new jobs, cut the cost of solar to the point where this year solar will be at grid parity. What's the program? What this feed-in tariff program means, you pay a fair rate, fair compared to the full cost of producing electricity, say, through a coal plant or a nuclear plant. That means higher rates, yeah? Yeah. The Deutsche Bank study showed that €2 to €3 a month, $50 a year, 8.6 billion euro more. Oh, sounds like a lot of money. We can't possibly have higher rates. That would kill economic development, wouldn't it? What Deutsche Bank showed was, had the Germans done nothing, just continued to burn coal, they would have paid 9.4 billion euro more. Sorry, you're going to pay more. You're going to pay less more if you have good policy. This is a tough one to wrap your head around. But it's the work now of a group here in California called the Clean Coalition. They've renamed feed-in tariffs, which is a translation from the German, to Clean Local Energy Accessible Now. Palo Alto just put one in. There's a variant of it now for the state of California. We're working to get one in Colorado. But we were all beat by Gainesville. Little old Gainesville said, we're going to pay 32 cents a kilowatt hour over 20 years for solar. Program sold out in the first week. They've got offers that will meet demand for the next 7 years, less than 1% increase to bills. Now, they haven't done the Deutsche Bank calculation of how much would it go up if they hadn't done it. Vermont now has it, reckons to install 40 megawatts. Dardesheim, Germany, 100% renewable. Wilpolsried produces more electricity than they need, so they sell it, earning $5.7 million each year for the community. Samso, Denmark, 100% renewably powered. This is introducing a new concept, well, a new old concept, that you can own your own power. It keeps the money at home. In Germany, farmers get together and put up a windmill or put up solar panels. They're locally owned. Radnor Township in Pennsylvania put up its own windmill. Marin Clean Energy, Charles McGlashan's great program. Overwhelming support for Marin Clean Energy. You can choose, do you want to be light green or deep green? They reckon it will keep $240 million in the community over the next 20 years. So we're trying something in Boulder. We're looking at municipalizing, stepping away from, in our case, it's called Xcel Energy, the local investor-owned utility. Why? Because Xcel just finished completing Comanche 3, a big coal plant, over the protests of a lot of us. And they will spend the next 40 years increasing rates to pay for Comanche 3. Whatever they say about, oh, we love renewables, we're all about renewables, their economics are they're going to pay for Comanche 3. And indeed, Xcel rates have been steadily going up. So we've just done a study in Boulder showing that municipalization will not only deliver the opportunity to move toward 100% renewable, it'll deliver better reliability and lower rates. The cost of renewables is coming down dramatically, in part because of what the Chinese are doing, getting production volumes up and thus costs down, just in part because of the increased production volumes here, the better science. Walmart putting solar on, I think already 75% of Walmarts in the state, aiming for 100%. In Southern California, we're building a megawatt a week before the '08 collapse. Southern California Edison did a 250 megawatt power plant on roofs spread around the county at a price point, $875 million, that's eerily close to the $800 million it would have cost to build a coal plant up in Montana of the same size. In Montana, the coal plant was denied because the Utility Commission said coal is no longer the cheap option. There they said wind was. Of course, efficiency is even cheaper. Butte College, first college in the U.S. to generate more electricity than it uses, putting the, except Merced? Yeah, they're not producing 100%. Butte's doing 100%, selling its excess and earning money for its academic programs. When you hear we're going to cut academic programs, we're going to raise tuition, think about this. Maybe we ought to be using the transition to renewable energy to fund education. I mentioned Walmart. IKEA just announced 100% renewably powered by 2020. And solar's not the only technology. In 2010, 2011, we brought on more new wind around the world than the entire nuclear capacity of Japan. And I've never heard anybody call for an evacuation plan from a wind farm. Wind spills, that's a bad one. Again, we think of energy as this global market. Maybe we ought to start thinking of it locally. And sometimes it may be the only economic development option you have. Beaver, Utah. Rob Adams, who's the local economic developer, said, you sell what you have. He said, we got a lot of wind. So he invited in a wind farm. The wind farm is now helping the community revitalize its education, rebuilding schools that had been condemned, and delivering economic value into the community. 250 new jobs at a much higher pay rate than conventional jobs in the county, as a result of which the county tax base is going up. I mentioned in the principles of economic development, entrepreneurship. This, I think, may be the real answer for community economic development in this country and around the world. I mentor for a group called the Unreasonable Institute in Boulder. A couple of young guys, graduated college, put together an organization to bring young entrepreneurs from around the world, particularly in the clean tech space. Owing to George Bernard Shaw's quote that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world, the unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself, therefore all progress depends on the unreasonable one. Entrepreneurs like Scott Frank, who lived for 2 years on the Tibetan plateau, co-inventing with the people there a solar cooker heater appropriate for the plateau, now being manufactured in China and now being taken globally. Alejandro España, who inherited a 100-year-old family candy business and is using it as a basis of transforming Mexican agriculture to organic agriculture, to fair trade. Donna Martin, who is working with First Nations communities across Canada to enable them to go 100% renewably powered. These young entrepreneurs are bringing to market cool things like hydrovolts, these devices that you set in an irrigation canal. Water flows from the north of California to the south, evaporating and not doing any work. Well, put these little guys in it and make it generate electricity. You can do the same thing at a micro level in cities. When you do all of this, you get the jobs. 10 times the number of jobs from renewables that you get from building a central station plant. And how many central station plants have we been building in the country? No nukes, and we're closing coal plants. Which is why the growing jobs today are in the clean tech sector. Total U.S. economy, job growth rate, not very attractive. Despite today's good news, we're not growing very many jobs, except in clean tech. In this state, 3 times as fast as the traditional economy. And 1/4 of them are in manufacturing. We keep talking about we need to bring manufacturing back to the United States. I think what's going to bring manufacturing is clean tech and the maker movement. Same thing globally. Occam Steiner of UN Environment Program. A greener economy could create between 15 million, 60 million jobs worldwide over the next 20 years. You know the myth? It's the rich who create jobs. You can't take away their benefits. The rich create jobs. Big companies create jobs. Can't do anything that would interfere with the big companies. Turns out it's not true. We knew that. Kauffman Foundation did a study showing that in all but 7 years between 1977 and now, the big companies were net job destroyers. Jobs are created by little companies and by startups, by entrepreneurs. And even in the big companies, it turns out those that are bringing to market disruptive innovation around energy efficiency are financially outperforming traditional industry. The companies that are the leaders on the Carbon Disclosure Project's leadership index had twice the average total return as the Global 500. You get benefits from this stuff beyond just the economics. little company called Harbec Plastics in upstate New York, injection molding company, out on the end of a rural supply line. They would have fluctuations in power, and every time it fluctuated, they lost a batch. This was making it hard to compete. They came in and did a whole building retrofit, starting with an audit, simple replacements. They put in their own little power plant, combined heat and power, and wind and biofuels. They did this about 2 weeks before the Northeast blackout, 2003. Companies in the area were losing huge amounts of money with the outage. Harbec just kept working, paid off the capital cost of their installation. In the recent Hurricane Sandy in New York, Manhattan, much of Manhattan was blacked out. Part of it wasn't. This little unit had its own combined heat and power system. Oh, and Goldman Sachs. They didn't go dark either. It turns out there is a tremendous national security reason for doing exactly what you would do to do community economic development, which is, by the way, exactly what you do if you're scared of climate change. The big systems are inherently vulnerable. We did a book, 1981, Brittle Power, written for the Pentagon, on the vulnerability of the domestic energy sector. And it had this quote in it, that these vulnerabilities alter the balance of power between large and small groups in society, eroding not only military security, but basic democracy. So it's interesting to me now that we see the U.S. military bringing renewables on. We have 100% renewable forward operating bases now in Afghanistan. The guys like them better. The solar panels for their communications are lighter and easier to carry than the batteries they used to have to carry. Why are they doing it? Because they know most of what gets hauled over the Khyber Pass is fuel to run their bases. For every 24 convoys of fuel, a Marine comes home in a body bag. We now have bases like the Fort Carson military post that reckons by 2020 to be 100% renewably powered, and it's essentially a small city. Lewis McChord Joint Base up in Washington is looking to do the same thing. The military is now operating under an executive order to implement sustainability. If you'd have told me 5-10 years ago that the two entities on the planet doing the most to drive sustainability would be Walmart and the U.S. military, I'd have offered to eat my hat. But here we are. And it offers communities, I hope, a sense that doing this is not totally crazy. And of course, if systems go down, it's really not totally crazy. Jerry Mander across the bay says he thinks relocalization is inevitable because the global economy will break down. There are over 1,000 communities around the world now working on transition town initiatives, local community self-reliance. And there are communities in places like the UK. Bedzed was built from recycled, reclaimed material, low-impact materials, built around gardens, built to be energy efficient, with solar panels, with passive solar, part of a transportation plan, built to be a community. Our old mental models no longer serve us. The notion that environmental protection costs jobs, that if we take care of community, it hurts economic development. These don't serve us anymore. I asked at the beginning, who's responsible? Hemingway said, everything's your fault if you're any damn good. Yeah, change is hard. Margaret Mead said the only person who likes change is a wet baby, and I'd argue the baby squalls all the way through the process. I didn't say this would be easy. It's just easier than not doing it. And Maimonides said, we should each see ourselves as though the entire world is held in balance, and anything we do can tip the balance. So again, I'm deeply grateful to the community here at Berkeley for all of the work that you're doing on the technical side, on the communications side, on the social side of making a better future possible. Thank you.
Very inspiring. So we have a few minutes for questions. I have one. I've had some wonderful conversations with Hunter, and by the way, she'll be here next week and might have some slots in her dance book if you want her to join a class or you want to meet with her, so talk to her afterwards. But you know, we do a lot of work on creating negawatts here, right? We do a lot in energy conservation, and much of the work done in I4Energy is really related to energy conservation. Always liked that term negawatt, and I understand you have some history on that.
It was a typo. It was a typo in a document in the Colorado Public Utility Commission, a man named Ron Lair. And we were sitting in there, and one of my colleagues was reading it. He said, oh, you have a typo here. It says negawatts. You mean megawatts. And Amory said, that's what we're talking about. And it's now the official term of art. It was a typo. So thanks for working on it.
Yeah. Questions?
Is there any role in our economic community for the Amazons of this world?
What kind of Amazon do you? This is International
Sorry.
Women's Day.
Yeah, right. So the whole, I mean, there is a whole, that's right, it is. I've read that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, yes, there's a huge role because they exist. And their impact on local economies is profound and could quite well get more profound. I've heard sort of two speculations on this. One, Amazon will overreach and collapse. And two, there's a video, if you haven't seen it, Epic 2020. Anybody in academia should watch this video. It basically says by 2020, universities as we know them will be gone. Sobering video. And one of the things that it says is that Amazon will merge with Apple and become Applezon. And will become the purveyor of free online education. So without a doubt, we're in for a ride. Which way it's going to go, I don't know. I do know, though, that distant, unaccountable mega organizations do not have your interest at heart. And trust me, Walmart is not going green out of the goodness of its heart.
Right.
And the antidote to it is the sort of stuff I've been talking about. What can you do for yourself? So, for example, I think one of the great threats to Amazon is going to be self-publishing. You can now walk into various bookstores, plug in your manuscript, and whoop, out comes a printed book. And you can print to whatever volume you want. Now, Amazon is responding to this by helping writers publish. So you can go to Amazon with a manuscript. They will help you lay it out. And either do an ebook or ship you bound books. And I've had several friends who have published this way. And as an author, dealing with the unaccountable, monolithic, distant behemoths like McGraw-Hill and the other publishing entities is no fun. I'm tempted to try Amazon on that one. But it would be so much better if it were in Pegasus Books or the campus bookstore here. So I think our opportunity is to take these technologies and make them local, and make them accountable, and make them serve the meeting of human needs in our towns.
Okay, I think our time is up. Let's thank Hunter Lovins.